Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. For those who are the first to attend our Artisan lecture series, it is the only lecture series in the United States that is dedicated to promoting master artisans. And we are thrilled to have as sponsors of this series Peter Penoyer Architects, Bauer and Dean Publishers, the McQuestion Companies, and also the very, very great support of the Landmark Conservancy. Kate Ottavino of Ottavino Corporation will share with us tonight her training, many examples of the work in which her company and she has been involved, from the stone carving foundations to installations, as well as her involvements in training future generations. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you. Thank you. It's lovely to be here, to see so many people interested. I don't know how many of you actually practice in the field, or how many are just general supporters of the arts in general. My talk is, if it gets a little specific, someone could just say, move that along, and it'll be all right. I'm very proud to be here. I'm a member of the General Society. Society is a great organization, and going back to the days of John McComb, and whose some of work we've had the privilege to restore, it's really sort of the legacy of artisanship in New York City in particular, but as a national phenomenon. And as part of that history, it's of course a multicultural ethnic tradition, and my tradition in our family's business is from Italy. My grandfather came over from Italy in 1906, and he worked as a stonemason, and he formed our company in 1913. And I'm the third generation with my two sisters, Meg Ottavino, I don't know if she's here, and Sally Ottavino, and her husband, my brother-in-law, Mohammed El Kordi, is now our president. So we continue in this fashion. So I'd like to start with, oh no, I see, I've got it mixed up already. With a picture in the center is my grandfather, Adamo Ottavino, who founded the company. And these are the stone carvers and business associates that he began the company with in 1913. Oh, keep doing this. This is one of our early monument and mausoleum retail shops. We had several around many cemeteries. The industry itself has changed, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. And here is the beginning of our stoneworks. We started with a smaller building here, and then the stoneworks beyond it. And just to take a tour of the original stoneworks, which we actually do inhabit today, very much as they are laid out here. You can see here the large funnels of where the carbide and grit that was used to carve the stones was stored. And this is the engine room that would run much of the equipment. And this is the blacksmith's shop, which we still have. And this is some of the stone that's ready to be sawn, wire sawn. This is the machine room where we still modify our tools and make tools to suit the particular project that we're on. And again, an overview of the crew. And in action, it's interesting to see that a lot of the technologies that were hand carving here, also at the turn of the century, pneumatic tools came in, and pretty much those are the same types of carving tools we use today. And here we are polishing a stone prior to fabricating, slabbing. And here we're seeing a technique of bush hammering the stone, which gives it a particularly fine finish on the stone. This is an overview of the stoneworks, pretty much as it's laid out. And then this is the exterior view, and the main entrance today is down here. So this was the original building, and then we built this extension of the building over here where we house our main offices. And this is an interior of the shot today. This was in preparation for a Guastavino Tile conference that we were hosting a workshop for. And we began our business as monument and mausoleum fabricators and installers, designers, and we do a number of pieces that required very ornate carving, very personalized vision of the people, many often very ethnically specific. Designing mausoleums. My father studied architecture at the Catholic University of America, and he did a lot of the designing for mausoleums. And then also we do simpler stones as well. Then, because we were well known in the field of monument construction, we were called upon by the Parks Department to become involved with public monuments as well. This is the creation of the Pulitzer Fountain, and that's my father there, who is to give scale to the dimension of the bowl that's going to be carved to what we see here today. And we've done several fountains, and one of the things that's interesting about working as long as we have is that we become involved with multiple different materials and mediums. And so here we actually restored the bronze as well as the bluestone and the sandstone ring of the museum. The Cherry Hill Fountain, and here, this is one of the really charming pieces, the encaustic tiles that we restored, one of the early uses of encaustic tiles, so it's a very beautiful thing. And this is the Italian fountain. Part of our work is research to find the original images of what the project looked like so that we know what we're trying to achieve in the restoration. This is the monument when we came to it for the conservation, and then this is the project during conservation as it's being cleaned. The Statue of Liberty, Jean Viard is here. This is a project dear to his heart. He did all the restoration, not all by himself, but of the copper of the Lady Liberty. And down below the Richard Morris Hunt base, we carved entrances to enable them to put in the new elevator system. This is the National Main Monument, done by Attio Piccirilli and Harold McGonigal, a team of architect and artist who many people are sort of rediscovering these days. Beautiful Tennessee pink marble. And again, here is the Fireman's Memorial, also by McGonigal. And these pieces are interesting because we actually took them all apart down to the brick core and then conserved them and rebuilt them, and we'll explore that process when we get into case study. This is kind of an overview of what we do. This is the William Cullen Bryant, Herbert Adams, and Carrera Hastings. And this is actually two dear people, Joseph Bresnan, who led the Parks Department and their preservation division for years and years, a wonderful man, who still is with us and does show up now and then. Kent Barwick, whom you all know from the Municipal Art Society, is presenting the award from the Municipal Art Society. It's early recognition of restoration work. This is for the main monument. This is my father, George Ottavino, and his brother, Jerry Ottavino. And I worked a lot with my Uncle Jerry. He sort of ran the field crews when I was growing up. My father basically managed and ran the interior production and fabrication and business development. And their older brother, John, who was running the monuments division when he passed away, and then my uncle took over that. But anyway, so that's a little view of the people. This is a fascinating project. This was Stanford White and Augustus Saint-Gaudens, the Farragut monument. Originally had a bluestone base, and it was so deteriorated that we were commissioned to carve it in granite. So that was a really unusual commission. This is the Soldiers and Sailors Monument, and Joe Bresnan's uncle, Walter Beretta, was involved with the restoration of that. So the Parks Department can be a family business too. And we carved several of the Corinthian capitals. We also do smaller pieces of work, such as the City Hall plaque here. And then the Southampton World War Memorial in the Hamptons is was a lovely place to work, but as an interesting scale of monument. And also new work. This is Michael van Valkenburgh, say that correctly, landscape architect, and this is a natural formation of bluestone that he had us build basically to his drawing. So he was having us create the process of the geologic formation, which is very interesting and creative. And that's all dry set, so those pieces could sort of be disassembled. This is the Eternal Flame, very challenging piece. The Korean War Memorial, Battery Park City. And we also do work abroad, I mean not abroad, but afield. This is Lewis and Clark Memorial in Kansas City, and the Mother of Africa Chapel in the National Shrine in Washington, D.C. And this is an interesting piece because this is a building, Ralph Cram Adams had redone it, and then Lee Pomeroy came and redid the interior again, and we did the whole nave floor and marble mosaic. And then this is the Fuente Chapel at the Cloisters. And this is an early project of ours, not so early, in the late 50s, where they brought over from Fuente the cloister, actually the apse of St. Martin's Church was all that was left of it, and so they brought over 3,000 pieces of limestone, and then we re-erected that here on the site. And this is the Brooklyn Borough Hall. So you can see now we're getting more into buildings. This is public building restoration. And this is the Borough Hall. It's an 1848 structure. We restored the exterior and the interior. And here we created 2 new columns that had been deteriorated and recreated the staircases that used to be there but were no longer, and did the new floor. So it's an interesting mixture because it takes traditional craftsmanship, but yes, you're working in new contexts. This is the New York Historical Society that we recently finished. And we did is we carved new entrances because these windows used to be here and there, the same height, and we created and carved the new entry and brought it down. And this was a challenging project, I'm sure, for the Landmarks Commission to go with. This is the gatehouse for the Croton Aqueduct system, which was converted by Rolf Olhausen as the architect into a theater. And so we had to do a lot of recarving and resetting of stones to make new entrances so that people could come in the building. This is the Cooper-Hewitt Museum, where we just finished cleaning the exterior and doing a lot of the stone restoration there. And the New York Yacht Club across the street, Warren and Wetmore. Here, this is harder to see, but to reset the balustrade, and in the process, there was a lot of decay, had to protect their Tiffany stained glass window, which was extremely precarious. This is the Union Club, made of Alabama limestone, which is a particularly hard, dense, durable material. This we did was the cleaning and pointing of the building. And Columbia Law Library steps, the McKinnon and White, we removed all of the steps and reset them all, rebuilding the foundation. This is Manhattan Supreme Court, and the same there. And this is Harry Winston. This is an interesting building. It's a reclad structure in the late 1950s for the Harry Winston flagship. Travertine, very similar to what you find at Lincoln Center. And this building was cleaned and the new cornice pieces put in. And moving even further in time, the Whitney Museum by Marcel Breuer, 1960s, we erected and custom designed our scaffold system to create basically monorails by which we could remove every single panel of stone on the building. And then we brought that all back to the stoneworks, which is why we need the size and scale of stoneworks we have. And so unlike when we were just building stone, now you need that kind of space to restore it. And so we took it back to the stoneworks where we cleaned and restored stone, but also carved all new anchor holes because the original anchoring system had failed. And so a totally new system was designed by Wishteni Elsner, and then put them all back. I'm doing it again. And in addition to restoration, we do new stonework. This is a sample of the many different stones we import or come domestically. This is St. John's Cloister, which we built. Holy Cross Cloister in Holy Cross Cemetery in Brooklyn. There you see it later. And also contemporary buildings such as 535 West End Avenue. There's a large, as we all know, boom in housing and hotel construction. And this is the interior lobby of 4300 Crescent Street in Long Island City, which is kind of up and coming. Very beautiful design, stairs, detail. And this is the interior of the Manhattan Family Court, which had all new limestone installed and on the columns. And moving from the broad brush, I'm going to get a little more specific with the a little bit of a case study approach where we get to see our artisans actually doing something. This is the Temple of Dendur, and I'm showing this project because it's sort of prototypical for our approach to a lot of the restoration work we do. And this is the temple while it's in Nubia in Egypt. It was given to the United States because of the rising waters, and it was under threat of destruction. And here you see them in Egypt having disassembled the stones and packing them away. Here they are laid out to get crated. These were shipped to America and stored in a air structure tent. And when we were commissioned to do the work, we were working for drawings from the Monument Historique, who had documented the temple when it was in Egypt. And Brown, Lawson, and Forbes were the architect for the museum. And here you see the temple as you see it today in its own enclosure. And we're going to focus on this gateway entrance, and then later on the pronaos, as examples of techniques that we use in the restoration process. So here we have a lintel that had cast stone put in, as well as structural repairs. Here you see on the lintel piece where we would pin original pieces back onto stone that had fallen apart. And we worked with the Christina Lilliquist, who is the Egyptologist, who could actually identify pieces of stone where they actually would have come from in terms of hieroglyphics and things of that nature. And here you see pieces that are pinned and the cast stone infill. This is being done instead of this approach, which was where you would mortar and fill out all of the moldings. It was decided to not go in that direction and just let your eye fill out anything that was missing. And although it might be jarring, it would allow you to read the authentic material without being distracted. And then here again, you see the cast in place stone and the original alongside of it. And this is where we're doing structural repair, putting in steel tie dowels to keep the lintel piece together. And then you see them back and installed in place. This is the pronaos, and which was erected here after we had worked on it downstairs in the basement. So we're looking at this corner here. Before installing it in its home, we dry laid it downstairs in the basement to make sure everything aligned and that everything would be correctly interpreted. And this column here, you can see a lot of the cast stone infill that's supporting the fragments. And what we did is down in the basement, we would shim up to create the level condition and piece together, and then fill in the cast stone in place around it. And then that's how you see it today. That's that piece over there. We just recently completed the St. Paul's Chapel down at the foot of City Hall Park. And this is a 1766 structure, but the portico is 1795. It was put on later. And this is it before restoration. You can see the kind of deterioration that the stone is undergoing. And part of a lot of what we do before we do anything is a lot of mock-ups and testing and finding the right materials, the right colors. Takes a lot of going through and practice to get right color. Brownstone is a particularly finicky material. It's very variegated in color. You can have a light rose and then a darker chocolate, all coming from the same quarry. And over the years, the church had been restored in the 30s and again in the 60s with concrete patches, and all of the bases, basically, you couldn't, this is the original stone, but you really couldn't tell what its moldings were. This is all patch. So it was a challenge to actually identify what was the original material and profile. We were fortunate, it's a Belleville sandstone, to find salvage material, and that's one of the things that we do use our spaces to have salvage materials, like from the Statue of Liberty. A lot of the Rockport granite that we took out, we now still have and can use in restoration projects. So this material we brought back to the stoneworks and carved. This would be called a Dutchman, which is a stone patch, to simulate the flutes that we saw on the original columns. So this is an area which is not so deteriorated that it would have to be removed, but deteriorated pieces of stone could be chiseled back to sound material. But other areas, it was very deteriorated and needed to be removed. And here you can see some of our artisans at work. This, I think, is Marty. That might be Sal. Behind, and they're basically, this is being done by hand. And then in other areas, once we get to a certain point, we can start to move into saws and pneumatic tools. Then once we've removed the stone, and there are different ways of doing what we are calling a Dutchman. This area is going to get what we call the stone patch. In this instance, we've decided, because of the incredible irregularity and the hand nature of the original construction, that we would actually make a plaster cast of the material. And here you see Zora, who's one of our happier artisans. He's about finishing over here. What we did is we cast in place and then carved the actual Dutchman in plaster. And here you can see he's matching it to the top and the bottom. And then we brought those plaster casts back to the stoneworks as models that we will now carve the stone from. And here you can see Vasco, who is a more serious artisan, carving and the piece. And you can see he's using pneumatic tools there. And Zora working his piece here. And then, just as we were saying with the temple, we do dry laying and fitting of everything before it goes back to the site so that we know we have a perfect fit. And St. Paul's Chapel, I was saying, the portico, the architect, or believed to be architect, James McBean, or Thomas McBean, was a student of James Gibbs. And so we looked to the handbooks that he would have worked with. This is the rules of the drawings, and they were very popular at the time, where the architects would give you the proper proportions for a specific order of architecture. In this case, it was the Ionic order. And so we took this handbook and then created the profiles for each of the different columns, and they do vary, and as a result, some of the more fungible, shall we say, moldings had to accommodate the variation of the site-specific condition, and another thing that comes with hand construction. And then we use these drawings to actually fabricate the new bases. And here you see them being assembled. And we stagger the joints so that you don't get water penetration for a better design of installation. And here you see the pieces going up with the stone Dutchman and the base. And here you see us, and this is where the range of our skills is not just by hand, but we have to be able to manage heavier machinery as well in order to work at a scale that's architectural. And we're removing the old patchwork, and there's the piece ready, the base ready to receive the new pieces. And this is just a few shots of them completed. And that's St. Paul's today. And another project that we worked on, which is required several different versions of our capacities, is 256 Broadway. This is a piece by Napoleon Lebrun, is the architect. It was the home insurance offices, and is now owned by the Department of Design and General Construction, where they're moving city offices in, and that's one of the great things about our civic center is that we are keeping our city hall and we're not expanding it, but actually just moving into the surrounding community. And this is a beautiful Tuckahoe marble building about 1899, and this is an after restoration. It's a very delicate material, very popular at the turn of the century when we went from the brown decades to the Beaux-Arts white decades. And this is a beautiful white crystalline material with a high iron content, which is all this brown that you're seeing. And but as a result, its crystals, it dissolves in acid rain and becomes very friable or crumbly or saccharoidal like sugar. So here we used microabrasives, which are very, very fine powders that are used just to remove the slightest outer shell and go through repeated passes with water as a rinse. Tuckahoe you can't really saturate with water because of the iron. And then this is the beautiful, delicate carving revealed after cleaning. And then in addition, traditional Dutchman, here's a piece of marble being cut out. This is Georgia marble. It's also a coarse crystalline marble, but it's the closest match you can get today. Tuckahoe's not available anymore. And this is the piece installed. So these are the balusters that were in terrible condition, and they were decided to be replaced. And so what we did is we removed them from the building, and then we studied them literally, because a lot of the pieces, as you can see, pardon me. I don't know how to do this. Hannah, could you? So here comes the brains of the operation. The third generation. Thank you. Okay, sit there so I can get you. Okay, so anyway, I was trying to do this. Okay, so you can see that these are very deteriorated, and you can't, you have more detail here, none there. And so what we did is, Carlos actually did these drawings where he studied all of the pieces and came up with what the perfect marble baluster would have been if it had been intact. And then he carved it in plaster. We cast a plaster and then he carved in the plaster, because it's of course quicker to carve in plaster than stone. And then the rest of our artisans, here's Luis, went on to carve by hand the stone itself, using that as the model. And because the originals were carved each by a different artisan, we were fortunate, or are fortunate, that we have a number of artisans who work with us, and so we're able to produce each person got a baluster to carve, basically. And so here you can see it marked out in red, and then we carve down around it. So it's almost like you're creating a puzzle till you get to the final piece when you start to do all the final detailing. And this is part of the process where you work with the die, or basically the simple carved trace, starting to carve and trying in your efforts to replicate. And here again, just as with the temple, we do a dry setup, and then after that, we bring it back to the building. The Belnord Fountain, that was a real challenge. We were brought into this project late, meaning the Belnord Fountain had already been disassembled. This is the Belnord Apartments on the Upper West Side, and it's about circa 1909. And so we had to go to New Jersey, where they had brought these stones, and bring them back and try to figure out how to put this back together, because they weren't numbered. It was crazy. So that took a lot of Mohammed's time, as well as the artisans. And I did it again. Hannah, please stay up with me. I really need you. We also had to test the plumbing and the pitch of all the new lead linings in order to make sure that the spouts would work properly, and again doing mock-ups with different cleaning solutions to determine the gentlest way to clean the stone. Then, as I was saying, we over time have had to develop more skills in order to best service our stone artisan ability, and so here we actually poured the concrete foundation while other people did the plumbing. And then this is the piece reinstalled. And the Fountain of Life was a very interesting project up at the New York Botanical Gardens. Charles Tefft is the original sculptor, a member of the National Sculpture Society, which is going strong. And here, these pieces, the merman and mermaid, were missing. And so what we did is we took historic photographs. We commissioned fine artists who did not carve in stone, but actually sculpted in clay to actually create the merman and mermaid based on historic photographs and documentation. All of this was reviewed by the Art Commission. And when that was approved, we had them cast in bronze and then installed them here. This is the Flight 587 Memorial, a very interesting project in the sense that it required us to be sort of ready, willing, and able to deal with it, whatever came up. And so here, the artist, Katsui, designed a piece that was done in lots of small pieces with no mortar and just stainless steel dowels joining the pieces. So you had to be very, very meticulous in your laying of things and alignments of the stones. And here's the piece with some nice raking light. And this is Muhammad. He's our president. And what we did is we created templates, or rather inscriptions, of all of the layout of the lettering that was approved by the Art Commission. And then we sand carved it in the field. And so we had put a rubber stencil over here, and then literally with sand carved, like sand blasting, you blast hard particles of sand. And this is the piece. And then in conjunction with the piece, though, we all of a sudden, they're like, oh, well, we have these mosaics that we have to work with in the site, and we're not sure what to do with that. So like, okay. So we gave them a conservation treatment proposal. This is standard with all of our work, and that details the history of the piece, and it's more or less extensive depending on the size of the piece, and what needs to be done. So here we conserve the mural, which is glass and ceramic, and this remained in situ, but in this piece they asked us to remove the pieces and bring them to a designated site. And here we have our setters and our riggers, and these are teams that we are working with all the time on the outside. So this crew of our workers rarely works in the stoneworks other than delivering materials, but they are working and handling everything before it gets to us. So here they're removing the wall. You can see the brick section and then the tile, and then we're creating the materials, and these things can't just be standardly created. They need art creating supplies like ethafoam and things of that nature. And here is the Federal Measure plaque at City Hall. This is a 14-foot long Federal Measure, and the Federal Measure was created to document the Dutch and the English dimensions of measuring. And we were at that time considering having our own American Federal Measure. That never went through, thank God. We can't even get to metric. But anyway, so this is about 7 inches thick and 14 feet long, and 2 feet high. And so here you see doing our conservation testing. And again, this is complicated. This is gilded lettering, and the brads are brass gilded with glaze on top of that, and then a later day acrylic paint. So in working with these things, you can't always use water or traditional materials. You may have to move into non-water-based cleaning techniques and the requisite chemistry that goes with that. And then here you see it installed. So you can see where you were working with very tiny little things where, my size of hand is what's going to be used, but then you're working with people who can lift 1.5 tons of stone. So it gets a little complicated. This is the Columbus Monument, which is a fun project. It was sponsored by the Public Art Fund and the Department of Parks and Recreation. And this is the Columbus Monument before restoration. It was put in a little room. I don't know if you all saw that. It's the I'm forgetting the name of the artist, Tadutsi, Japanese artist. Tatsunichi, I needed my notes. And here's the scaffolding that's going up. And so we had to work within very short time constraints in very cramped conditions, and but yet never compromise the quality of what's being done. That's the artist. And so prior to doing any work, and even prior to determining the amount of work, here we're doing Rylem tube tests, which is a German method of testing the rate of uptake of water by the stone, and we're seeing how the rate is on the south elevation versus the east elevation, and all going around, to see what basically the dynamic of the stone is, and what kinds of treatments would be necessary. And so it was decided that we would pre-consolidate the material, which is to make a strengthening of the very superficial surface prior to cleaning. And you can see there's a lot of biological growth all over. And then we went into microabrasives, dry microabrasive in this sense, in condition instead of wet. And then we also did biocide cleaning tests to see which would be the most effective. And here, you wind up doing toothbrush level cleaning to make sure you get just the area that needs to be cleaned. And where the microabrasive wasn't successful, then we went into water misting to remove the heavy carbon buildup in the interstitial or protected areas. And then afterwards, in the documentation process, we use grayscale so that future conservators and researchers will know what the true values were in the photographic image. And as we're moving down the column, this is a Sardinian granite. There are two colors to it, the gray and the pink. And this was done by Gaetano Russo, was the sculptor for both the stone and the bronze. And here you see the condition before restoration. It has deteriorated wax coating and lacquer below. And here it is being, after we stripped it of its lacquer and coating, and this is the process. Here you see again a lot of masking out so as not to get anything on the stone. And here it is after it's been lacquered. And here's one of the anchors before. And things also that you would just think, oh, caulking, anybody can do that, is incredibly meticulous in this condition because you have, just 1/8 of an inch, and sometimes it goes to 1/4 of an inch between the stones, and it really has to be perfect, especially when people are climbing up past it, 6 inches away. Below, this is Columbus, Gaetano Russo is arriving in America. This is the American Eagle. And this after conservation. And this is as part of the process, we do a mock-up of what the finished piece will look like for the Art Commission's approval before going ahead. In this case, it was stripping, lacquering, and then hot waxing. And here you see applying the lacquer, and here you see applying the hot wax. And these are some details of Columbus. Someone mighty glad to hit the ground. And then also things that seem as simple as pointing. We were pointing in very warm weather. It was in the summer. So after pointing, we would put burlap rags and mats, rather, it comes in like a roll, and then mist them all during the day so that things wouldn't get too dry too quickly and then crack. So a lot of what we do is from experience that you need to monitor the cures and the rates and the compatibilities of materials so that you prioritize what work sequence you use and what kind of protections and cautions you need. In addition, there are chemical washes. The granite had a lot of skateboarders around there, really bad conditions. And poulticing, this is a fuller's earth poultice mixed with some solvents. And here it's been applied at the base of the steps and then covered so that it will not evaporate too quickly and allow the chemicals to work. And this is the Discovery Angel with the globe, and this is after conservation, but before we did the conservation, again, test with different materials. This is a dolomitic aggregate, this is a calcium carbonate aggregate for approval by the Art Commission. Again, all of this work is done by consensus, so we make recommendations, but in the end, it is a consensus. And here you have the proper right wing and torso before a cleaning, and this is after. And same here, this is the left side of the angel's head and arm and wing. And this is after. The copper is a phenomenally almost impossible thing to rid when it's been embedded in the stone a long time. You can make it go away for a short time, but after it rains, it always comes back. And so after a while, you have to make a decision, are you abusing the stone to try to keep cleaning it after a while? And then again, detailed areas of cleaning requiring specific solutions. Here we're resetting a replacement tip to the wing of Discovery, and here it's just being tied to the scaffold to hold it in place while the setting bed cures. And this is Stanley repointing. And this is my nephew Abbas, who is infilling the letters. They needed to be painted where they eroded over time. And this is the finished product. Madagascar Lion House. These are lions that we conserved. They are by Eli Harvey, a Quaker sculptor, circa 1905. And again, this is an instance where our riggers and our setters we're depending on them to bring in to the stoneworks, the artworks that need to be conserved and can't be done on site because of construction or some other consideration. Here's one of the lions has landed, and this fellow is airborne. And then they safely landed at the stoneworks, where we then conserved them and came back. And this was a simple water misting and some infill grouting. Tennessee pink marble responds beautifully to just simple water misting. Again, knowing your type of stone, what its history of responding to the environment, really helps you to come up with the gentlest means of working with the material. This is the Central Park Police Precinct, 86th Street Transverse Road, going through here. This is a temporary building that was being taken down. And this is a plan of the site. This is the temporary building. This is the new police headquarters. That's a glass structure. This is the existing, originally stables by Jacob Ray Mold, and over the years converted into various uses. This is Longmeadow brownstone, Nova Scotia sandstone, and this is the gateway into the courtyard. And another detail of the courtyard. And here you can see where the new building intersects with the original, and then the original passes through. And I take the time to point this out because it forms a wonderful opportunity for us to see how this area, which is enclosed, should remain consistent and not deteriorate and be preserved for all time, as long as it's in that condition. Whereas this area, which is directly adjacent to it, we'll be able to measure the rate at which it weathers. How soon do you need to repoint? How soon will you need to clean? That kind of thing. So that's part of what we do is to hopefully add to the body of knowledge in the profession. And then here we have our encaustic tile again. So certain architects, they begin to have a palette that they work with, and the more you work with their buildings and monuments, the more delightful it is, and the more familiar you get with the kinds of problems they develop. Here, an iron cramp has rusted and spalled the stone. Along here, this was really the big problem that was faced. The salt and the traffic water saturated the walls over time. The brick was actually Parks Department efforts in like the 50s and 60s to try to keep the wall up. Obviously, they didn't think of putting in stone. And you can see the original finish here has weathered all the way from here. You can see ghosts of it, and again here. And so the problem really was, how do you manage this? Well, in effect, you're going to have to replace a lot of that stone. And so we'll check that for a second. But some of it you are able to, where it has deteriorated, refinish in place. This is Mark, and he is using a 9-point chisel to recreate the missing finish on the substrate beneath. And then in the areas where we did have to remove the stone, every stone is numbered to go back exactly where it came from. And here, we'll see how we treat each piece of stone as we go along. Here you can see that this is determined to be the soundstone zone. And above here is where the stone is going to be tooled back and refinished to match the adjacent. And in some areas where the whole piece is just rotten, it's determined to just cut that off and start fresh. And because the long meadow is no longer available, we tried to find a domestic stone to match, but in effect, really, this stone from China, it's a Berkshire red sandstone from China, proved to be the best match. So we ordered the slabs from China, and then we finished them here in America so that we could be sure to match the stones. And that required a series of stones, of chisels, the 9-point, a wide 3-point, a small 3-point, depending on the finish that you were simulating, because the original stones were finished in the field, and so they were very variegated. And here is Greg Adams. He's the son of George Adams, who is basically runs the crane when we're hoisting. So all those statues you see lifting, George's father was doing that. And this is a detail of the 9-point, creating the base finish for the stone, a little detail. And then coming back over with passes of the 3-point in a staccato fashion. That's a whole piece that's been refinished and is ready for cutting now. And here you can see with the raking light. And now there's Sal starting to cut the pieces for reinstallation. And these are the pieces. These are the originals to go back, and new finished pieces. And then in addition to working in the stoneworks, we did actually work refinishing the stone, as we saw earlier with Mark, in the field. And this is a detail of new sandstone adjacent to the original, and then another new piece. So here, this one is finished, and this one's in the process. You can see it as it goes back in layers. And here's another detail here. And that's the finished product prior to cleaning. Then in addition to the actual work on the stone itself, mortar is what holds it all together. And so mortar analysis is important for us to find out the physical properties of the original mortar, the texture, what it originally looked like, and to try to come as close to as possible to have a compatible physical relationship between the stone and the mortar. And so these are petrographic analyses that are done to give us the size of the aggregate and the type of aggregate and binder. And then here we see Mark pointing. So you can see it's a multiple discipline thing. It's conservation science. It's also literally the hand in the field. And this is the end finish where the joints have been repointed. This is a before cleaning, and this is after, again, using a microabrasive. And another shot looking forwards. And so these are just concluding photos as we go out. Moynihan Station we're currently working on now. This is the old Farley post office by McKinley and White. And here you see the steps and the cheek walls that are being removed. They're huge pieces. And we've taken them all down. This is work done largely by the riggers and the setters who they always have our back to us, so it's hard to point them out to you. But we take the pieces down and lay them and number them prior to loading them on the truck or flatbed to bring them again back to the stoneworks. And this is pretty much what we did with the Whitney Museum, just lay them all out. Here you can see the shadow of the stairs. And so these will be cleaned, old mortar removed, and prepared to go back to the site. Prospect Park Peristyle, Camille mentioned a little bit about our internship program, which we do with the Department of Education, is an opportunity for us to connect with the youth of our city and hopefully inspire them to want to do what we do, or to at least appreciate what we do. And so the Prospect Park Peristyle, we work in the summer with interns. Hopefully they'll get to experience particularly a monument. We like to work with them in cemeteries also, and parks, because they're nice, safe environments. But you can see the whole project soup to nuts, and they get the satisfaction of that. And so here, this is a combination of materials. This is Guastavino Tile. This is by Stanford White, about 1905. Terracotta capitals and frieze, and then marble columns and granite and brick floor. And so here, a little bit of a collage, we have the students, they're doing the preliminary rinsing down. Then over here, they're learning how to apply the poultices, and you can see a lot of the graffiti that's been on. And one of the things they do at least walk away with is it's a rotten shame to have to paint the marble because we can't get rid of the graffiti. And then here's some Guastavino tile that's being removed and will be replaced. They got to see this is terracotta that was manufactured specifically for the project. They get to see it uncrated, see the block, and then actually see it go back and be installed. And there's Stanley, and let's see who's next to him. Okay, these students are from the Brooklyn High School for the Arts. And this is the finished temple. So having returned to parks, we'll go full circle and return to cemeteries, which is where we began. And now, as part of our work in cemeteries, we do a lot of conservation. This is the Pierpont Family Memorial at Greenwood Cemetery, who has been wonderful about sponsoring interns and taking interns to work on their own grounds and in-house projects. This is done by Upjohn, and this is after conservation. And this is a detail in a corner where there was a red mortar applied at some point in the maintenance history, a tremendous amount of efflorescence, which is salt blooming through or being drawn to the surface of the brownstone, a Belleville sandstone, just like St. Paul's, from the water infiltration above. And again, with a microabrasive cleaning, we were able to remove the efflorescence and not engage the substrate beneath it because it's a very soft material. And then this is a detail along the coping. What am I doing? And this is after conservation. And then finally, we'll conclude with our the Ottavino family monument, a current day monument that was actually designed by my father and made a little maquette. And this is what we do for other projects as well, but this is personally important to us. And this is a bas-relief of my grandfather. And with that, I'll conclude with our firm motto, Vita brevis ars longa, life is short, art is forever, especially in stone. And thank you very much. I don't know if my sister's here. I just wanted to introduce my sister, Meg Ottavino. She's our vice president. She's waving to us. And she's the director of our Memorial Art Studios.
And we can take questions now, if you can raise your hand.
Sure.
Hi, thanks so much for a really great presentation and overview. Very early on, there was a slide of I presume, St. James Cathedral? Is that the
St. James Church on Madison
church.
Avenue?
Okay, I was wondering if it was the cathedral in Brooklyn.
No, it's on Madison Avenue.
St. James, great.
St. James
And
Church.
secondly, how do you cultivate the artisans? Because
That's a
it
very
sounds like you've
interesting
got
question.
legions of staff.
Yeah, right. Some are like Greg Adams are the children of our employer, of our employees, and we have several generations. The Saunders have been with us. Their father, Marty's son. so a lot of it is father to son relationship. But in addition, a lot of the artisans are themselves artists. And I always think that's an interesting kind of conundrum that Cellini sort of explored for us all. But they really do have their own artistic skills and talents and compete in competitions. And so there's a lot of word of mouth. So they'll say, well, look, if you need to earn a living while you're having your piece shown at a gallery, why don't you try working with Ottavino Corp? And so we'll interview the people, and some people stay and other people go. It's not everyone. It's a temperamental business. Artisans are temperamental, but they're worth it. Yes.
Last week at the Historic Districts Council kickoff to their big 50th anniversary, the speaker was talking about how to get young people interested in landmarks. And nothing was said until the questions later that why not young people being interns? And so my question would be, how can we increase this relationship with high school kids and others?
Right.
The problem is that most young people who may not be that good in history and English and other courses, they have no vocational training or shop or anything. Girls don't have equivalent things as well as boys don't know how to weld or do sheetrock, or in your case, stone carving. How do you really promulgate this?
Well, we were very fortunate to work with the Department of Education. I work also with the the Center for Building Knowledge at NJIT, and we collaborated there at the center to create a Preservation Arts and Technology high school curriculum. And our firm piloted the internship program for the Department of Ed, so they could believe it's possible, you can engage private industry, this is something we can do. And it is very possible to get involved. If any of you would like to become involved, please contact me and I will happily put you in touch with the guidance counselors who are working with this. There are 3 high schools right now: Bronx International High School, Williamsburg High School of Architecture and Design, and also the Mather High School, which is working with the Park Service. But all of these schools, if you are interested or know any firms are, we have Ms. Dawn from Aurora Lampworks with us. Dawn, would you wave? Has hosted many interns at her Lampworks in Brooklyn. And we have Kim Lumjoy from Evergreen Studios, who have had 1 or 2, at least, I would say, interns. They are fine art. I believe Jeff Green will be speaking at some point. And Jean Villard is here. And his whole tradition is the guild system, which is, of course, high school and on. Be involved. So it's completely possible. It's not necessarily as well known as it should be. I'm surprised the Historic Districts Council didn't bring that up, but anyway, so please feel free to reach out and I will put you in contact with people at the school.
How many people work at your company to do this work? Because it does seem as if you would need several armies.
Right. We have 30 full-time people. Right, it's amazing, but we work winter and summer, so a lot of the work that you see, and you're actually bringing up an interesting point, like with the Moynihan Station, during the winter we can be doing all of the conservation work that we will then be setting in the spring. So that is a big balance for us, is to be able to work 12 months of the year.
And the temple that you brought over to the Met, when you were in Egypt, did someone visualize, okay, we'll take this chunk because it'll look good? Or was it much larger and you skinnied it down to what it is now? I mean, I can't imagine that when you were in Egypt you thought, well, these two pieces will look nice.
Well, we were not in Egypt. The Egyptians disassembled the Temple of Dendur with the Monument History, collaborating with them, and they shipped it over in crates to America.
Okay, so you got it after its
Right,
arrival. You weren't
right.
there as far as...
No, we were not, and that was, of course, a challenge.
Piece.
No, they took pretty much the whole thing. They didn't take the actual embankment where theoretically the tomb would be. The princes were like 5 years old and they drowned in the Nile, so I really don't even know what the remains would have been like.
But that's pretty complete then.
Yes, it was into a hillside, and yes, so they brought over the gateway, the pronaos, the vestibule, and then they simulated in the architecture the embankment.
Right, very good. Thank you.
Kate, I'd like to ask how new technologies in architecture and construction are affecting your very traditional business. What are some of the ways you have had to adapt?
Well, actually, it's not even so much adapting as it is continuing to grow with the industry, which is one of the reasons why the Marcel Breuer building was albeit a challenge, not an unfamiliar one, because we had built buildings of that nature using that kind of technology. So really, the preservation arts is kind of the throwback to our earlier years that we've been able to sustain because we are always involved with contemporary construction. So have been able to bring our 100 years forward while we are living in the present.
Hi. Have you considered using digital 3D modeling at all in the future?
Digital 3D modeling. We do computerized cutting on of the saws, and there is laser cutting that, although we don't do that, there are quarries that do that. In stone, I don't really know that we would need to do the modeling. I mean, there is this stereometric aspect of creating shop drawings and understanding how you get an object from a solid. But I'm not saying that it couldn't be useful, but doesn't feel a need to move it forward. Did you have an idea that you were thinking about?
Yeah, for example, those the balustrade pieces,
Yeah.
they were all the same, right? So if you had...
No, that's the important part. They were
Oh, they
all
were not.
originally hand-carved, and although they were all to the same design,
see.
which is why I was emphasizing that we used different carvers in the stonework so that we were getting as close as possible to the spirit
Sure.
and the technology that was a part of that period at
Or-
the turn of the century.
I should say, well, they're very similar, right?
Well, they were all of the same design, and but each one is carved by an individual. So some leaves might have more undercut, some might have less, some have maybe more in relief, others less relief. Am I making my? Am I?
Oh, yeah, well, I guess the point I was going for, which might be derailed now, but like if you could use like a machine similar to what they used to make cars, like a robot 7-axis machine with the drill on the end, and you could kind of copy paste those and modify them a little bit on the computer, would that not be easier than doing it by hand?
Well, I mean, I don't doubt that it would be easier, but it wouldn't be near as authentic. I could see doing that for a new building. I mean, I'm not, denying the technology, which is what I think Kim was bringing out, that yes, modern technology moves with modern buildings and modern perceptions. But in terms of restoration and preservation, we try to use the original materials, we try to use the original means and methods of creating and using those materials. That's just a sort of an ethical tenet of preservation. Some people might not agree with that.
Thank you.
I think we have to use the microphone. Sorry.
I've just been thinking, all these processes that you've been discussing, are they actually chronicled here in this library?
Oh, with the mechanics? No, they are not chronicled here. I mean, our firm in particular, no. I'm
But
sure
they're
they have
proprietary,
chronicles
you mean?
of things.
Are they currently proprietary, or?
Well, we should have an archivist come in. And I should probably talk to the General Society about that. Yes, we have lots of rolls of drawings.
I'm not an American. I don't know if I should be asking this question, really. I import marble in a very small way in Britain from Pietrasanta in Italy and places like that. But we do have a problem in Britain with low labor rates in the Far East and really deregulated industries. We have floods of Chinese-made things coming in. There is a bit of a reaction against that. It doesn't always look very authentic. I've seen in America things like a very entertaining Canova's Three Graces in St. Armand's, which is quite definitely 3 Chinese graces. So it can be amusing on that scale. I felt it was a bit strange getting the Martin Luther King monument to be sort of almost entirely Chinese. I don't know how people feel about that in the United States. I think in Britain we'd be a bit taken aback. But do you personally, and does the industry in general, have a view on local sourcing as much as possible? And
Well, in terms of, somebody saying something. In terms of sustainability and the lead philosophy of transport and energy sources being local to avoid the costs of transport and things of that nature and the energy involved in that, yes, I think that there's a real movement towards that. One of the things that was unfortunate was that we did have to go to China to get the brownstone for for the Central Park Police Precinct, but we decided collectively, the architects, the city, I'm not just speaking as myself, but that the color match, that the actual presentation was overrid the efficiencies of using local material. I think there's one more.
Going to your question about working with traditional methods, I was curious, because your company brought over techniques and craftsmen from Europe, and you have had 100 years in this country developing new techniques. Do you work with guilds and other stonemasons, and do you have conferences where you share techniques with European stoneworkers, and do you exchange information and techniques? Because
yes, we work with the Compagnons du Devoir and also with the Fondation de Coubertin in France, and they are very interested in having an exchange between the French artisans and the American artisans, and that is to some extent coming forward. There have been one or two. It's difficult for the French to get visas to come here, so there are these hurdles. But in terms of conferences and exchange of ideas, that's a very fluid field, and there are many organizations that foster that. The Association for Preservation Technology is a good example of that. That's an international organization. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, that's just beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you kindly.
Oh, Kate, I'm Kate Ottavino, and fellow General Society member. On behalf of the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen, we thank you for your contribution and participation to the Artisan Lecture Series. And we, as many of you know who are here, and of course you know, we were founded by 22 tradesmen, one of which was a stone cutter. And the principal mission of this series is to give voice to artisans like yourself so we can assist in ensuring your unique knowledge is carried forth for generations to come. I have to say that I think in your case, your family has this covered.
Well, we'll hope.
So, thank you. But again, thank you, Kate. It was a wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kate, we have a little memento for you, and plus we have library membership, which I think you will find there. So we hope you will. I know you.
So I may find an archivist after all.
It seems like there isn't a building in New York City that has stone that Ottavino hasn't left their imprint on. So I am sure you're incredibly busy, but it has been really wonderful to have you speaking tonight. And as I said, this little memento. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.